What's going on? Good morning. What's going on, AA? It's Wednesday. I think we're about halfway through the week. We got Jerome Powell coming in to visit little Daddy Powell. It's going to be an interesting day. It's just going to be the fact that the first few hours of this market open until what is that, roughly around 2 p.m. Eastern today, it's rather going to be a little bit choppy. We're likely going to see a little bit of a sporadic price action here. Within the first 30 minutes to an hour of the open, we'll likely get that sporadic price action. But then for the rest of what is it, the given 3 to 4 hours after that first opening hour movement, we're likely going to get us stuck in some kind of range here, particularly, is what I anticipate. All right. But as I get into SPY, so we can jump into things, you can basically see right off the bat, you have a nice little leading diagonal type of price action that's taking place here on SPY. I think it looked a little bit cleaner. I thought I actually had this. Let's see if I can fix my trend line here real quick. All right, just fixing that. So what you basically see is that we're pretty much right teetering below breaking that trend line support off of this little out day 2 hour or rising wedge type of action here that's taking place on SPY. So that's what I'm looking at right now. We're sitting right at the support level that I'm looking forward to. If we continue to break down or we get that pretty much impulse down to the downside, I'm watching for next level support at 283.89 is my next level support. So if we get the nice little push after the opening bell, I'm gonna look to see if that kind of sets us up for the bottom end of our range. Like I mentioned, I expect some significant type of range that we're gonna trade in. It's not going to be anything sporadic in terms of vertical price action here, but I'm looking for us to see where is our base gonna start to form here going into the next 4 hours before we get our Jerome Powell message. All right. So let's see if we can settle just around just below that 383 mark. Let's see if we can get that. In terms of the 2 hour here, I'm watching that 200-day EMA as well. If we see even further movement to the downside within that first 30 minutes to an hour after the bell here, look for 381.53 for that 200-day EMA to pretty much smack, and we'll see if we get our reflexive bounce off of that, in which case that'll give us our bottom base for the range to trade for the next few hours. All right. Renee, what's going on? Good morning. So again, I am more so favoring to see if we end up getting a downside price action to give us a floor potentially, and then we'll likely build our way back up to the upside here within the next few hours. So 381.53, that is looking to be the bottom end of my morning range here, particularly for the day. Otherwise, looking for upside here. If you guys actually remember, I want to say most of the entire afternoon, if not all day, we had such a lot of chop yesterday as well. We started to build a little bit of a pennant type of action, but if unless we end up breaking over 386, that's going to be the top end of my range that I'm particularly looking at here. I don't see us going above 386. That would also signify us also reclaiming the trendline support of this little leading diagonal rising wedge action that you see on the bigger formation here. So 386 is going to be my upside. We break over 386, then we can start to talk about having a particular trend day. All right. I don't expect us to break north of 386 though until we end up getting our full MAC message today. Then we can potentially look to see if we pop over 386 off of Jerome Powell, and then that starts to build momentum, and we'll see a stronger movement towards the end of the day. All right, but 386 is my relative resistance I'm watching for the day. In terms of the floor, in terms of building a base, I'm watching at the floor of 381.53 off of that 200-day EMA, and that'll be the level where I'll decide if I really truly want to make a scalp for the day, for the morning ahead of Powell, or do I want to just particularly stay sidelined, wait to get the message, wait to see what the rate hike is going to particularly be that they're forecasting, wait to see what the sentiment is out of Jerome Powell. He is also going to likely address the ADP numbers that came in better than expected this morning. So I want to see exactly what his sentiment is going to be. What's his response in terms of the tightening going forward? If we remember not so long ago, the last message, if I remember from Jerome Powell, is that they were, well, not necessarily from Jerome Powell, that was actually from Goldman Sachs, actually, talking about rate hikes going up towards 5%. And basically addressing the fact that they are forecasting for rate hikes to go on beyond into 2023. It would be nice to see exactly if Jerome Powell actually echoes that kind of sentiment, saying that they can expect rate hikes to continue further and higher going into 2023. That's something that's going to kind of catch my attention and raise an eyebrow as to how the market's going to take that. So that's something I want to see. We also had JP Morgan also give another forecast as well. So that's going to be, in terms of Goldman Sachs giving their outlook, JP Morgan giving their outlook, I do want to see which one of those kind of sentiments does Jerome Powell piggyback off of when he gives his conference. All right. But getting back to pretty much the charts here, as we just want to look to particularly see if there's any morning trades available. I did wake up this morning and I kind of asked myself, I was like, why the hell is AMD up? But a hell of a price action off of AMD this morning popped up about 5% on the day. The structure wasn't looking particularly, I wasn't as fond of it until now, obviously, and it's given the fact that it has a catalyst, it has some morning news as well. So we see the relative pop that it has. But here's the pretty much the key part of trying to play this morning. Off the daily here, we have a nice little gap fill that sets up above 64.03. That's your relative resistance, in which it's about a dollar and a quarter away from current price at this morning, right? That's where I'm not trying to fix myself to get stuck into resistance with only $1 upside, particularly from current price. So I want to wait to see how do we end up reacting at 64.03 for that gap fill to be entered. Do we end up seeing the rejection and then we come right back down? But I would more so rather favor that we end up retesting the 20 EMA sitting at 61.28. If we retest the 61.28, then depending how the broader market looks, obviously looking at your names like Tesla, like Microsoft, like Apple, right? I want to see if we could potentially use that 61.28 on AMD as a support buy, right? As a potential dip buy for this little upside action that we have. And then we take that into the resistance of that gap fill yet again at 64. So from 61.28, I favor the upside from that given buy-in entry going into the gap fill test, other than trying to buy it at the gap fill and then risking a rejection. All right. So that's pretty much what I'm looking for. I'm going to look for that support buy at the 20 EMA at 61.28. Let's see if we get that retest of a potential support, and then we get to push right back up. So that's going to be pretty high on my radar this morning for AMD. The other name that kind of caught my attention as well was Airbnb. If I'm not mistaken as well, I kind of recall actually writing about Airbnb on our newsletter not that long ago, and I actually had a bearish take on it. It just took a lot longer than I anticipated to get a retest of this little prior trendline support as a resistance. And you see how long it basically took from the end of September, now sitting towards what the third week of October in order to get that retest. So it took a little bit longer than I anticipated for this to play out. But I was basically looking for the fact that we ended up breaking below that trendline support, right? We had our retest already take place. We started to curl down. You made a little bit of an ascending broadening wedge action, and I can basically draw out your trendline support right here. This is your trendline support that you were watching, and you did end up breaking below that trendline support. So it is roughly down about 5.5% this morning, and it is relatively news based this morning. Let's see if it actually has a headline here. Uh, okay, so not necessarily a headline just yet on here. I'm gonna have to see exactly what that headline was. I just caught the actual. Okay, so there is some news here. Let's see. Airbnb to fall is what's particularly the news here. Airbnb sank 6% pre-market after climbing 2% following its report of higher Q3 earnings and revenue. So it looks like their outlook on their earnings was not particularly no promising. And that's why we see the fact that even though they had a revenue beat, the fact is that they did not like the outlook, is more so what I'm picking up off of that. All right. But to play off of the chart here, I'm going to look for support to break here. Next level support that you're watching to particularly break is going to be under 101. Below 101, that takes us straight down to 96, and that's what I'm going to be looking to play off of. So below 101, you take it down to 96. That's roughly about a $5 move to the downside that you could potentially catch. If you're looking for basically a little bit of a resistance to pretty much buy off a resistance, I would watch to see if we can retest at 105 half. 105 half should be relatively a resistance for the morning. So if we see an attempt at recovery this morning off of Airbnb, Look for that resistance at 105 half. Potentially look to see if you buy off of that 105 half for your puts, and then potentially look to see what your risk is that you're willing to take. Is there going to be 15 to 20% off of that? And then you play off of that in terms of getting in at resistance and then having your stop loss in place, and then knowing the fact that your breakdown level is going to be at 101 and targeting 96. All right, so that's another one that caught my attention this morning. I'm gonna likely gonna be the second on my watch list here this morning behind AMD. Otherwise, there's not too much elsewhere on the playing field that's caught my attention. I did want to see what else there was. Was there any other news that kind of caught my attention off of this morning here? Let's see what other headlines we have. Amazon was up 0.5% before the bell after dropping 5.5%. Companies launched on Tuesday a merchant cash advance finance option provided. Okay, so we have some news. They're pretty much inventing some things. Tesla was down about 0.3% this morning. That's something else. The electric vehicle manufacturer has closed its flagship showroom in China. I don't think that has much effect on that. I don't think that sways the stock in either direction potentially. We did see SoFi. I believe someone actually commented about SoFi yesterday and the fact that it was actually on the rise. And they did have their earnings this morning, in which it's pretty much up about 0.5%. All right. Prachi, good morning. Check match, please. I can take a look at it. Let's see what's going on with match. MTCH. All right, so we are. Wow, it's a nice little earnings pop, I would anticipate. Finally broke the downtrend that you had. It looks potentially like it did. Let's see if we can get our trendline resistance in here to see what's in play. Where's our potential retest? Let's see if I get a trendline going here. All right, so we are above trendline resistance. That's a positive sign. And there was your opening bell. You're likely going to get the retest here this morning. Watch to see a retest at 49.5 on match. We are kind of trying to base here off of that 50 EMA as well. So 51 flat is what you're looking at. But below that, I believe you should trade down, probably wick to the downside at 49 half. As you just see, it's trying to crack that 50 EMA. Look to see if you hold that 49 half here. Otherwise, if you don't hold 49 half, then you're looking for a full-on gap fill right back to the downside here, and we're just gonna particularly look to fade this entire price action. So 49 half, that's likely where I would say you look to see if you dabble with some calls here at 49 half on match. Otherwise, that's why I say have a stop loss in place. Always have a game plan because if that doesn't hold 49 half, then you risk an entire gap fill to the downside. All right. Otherwise, if you do end up looking to pretty much get off of that 49 half, I would look to target here. You do have a resistance, particularly sitting at 56 and a quarter, and that would be where I would say is you look to lock in your profits. But you also have a gap fill sitting here at 56.64, which is roughly about a dollar give or take for that gap fill. All right, but I always like to pretty much lock in my profits going into a gap fill test before you get the rejection and you get smacked back down. All right. So that's pretty much looking at match. I mean, like I said, it's regressing, but 49.5 needs to hold here off of the retest of this downtrend break that you've had. All right. Just kind of glancing back at SPY. I mean, it does look like SPY is pretty much regressing to the downside here. I did mention I'm going to look for that 381 half. That's ideally the floor that I'm watching. But you are closing in on my support that I have at 382.89. Let's see if that ends up being our first level support that particularly holds or not. And then my next level will be that 381 spot that I'm going to watch 381 half. All right. So I'm kind of looking for that floor right now. Again, like I said, we're going to have a particular trading range that we're going to be. It's going to be a tight range more so until we get a directional move, given the fact that with FOMAC and with Jerome Powell, you're going to trade it within a box, within a range. Let's see where the floor of that range is, particularly this morning on this push to the downside. All right. The other thing, just to quickly remind you guys before I kind of just slide into our standard voice for our TFC members, keep in mind the fact that usually the first reaction off of FOMC is particularly the wrong one. Be patient. Do not jump the gun so quickly. But if you are going to end up jumping the gun, look to be pretty much quick to take your profits. Look for a quick 10% because you are going to get sporadic price action to the upside and to the downside as well. All right. But other than that, I will keep the stream up for the next few minutes. I'm gonna hop into our live voice for standard members, and then if anything, just drop a question in the comments for me. All right. But later, guys.